as the boss, I can get you to do things. I can motivate you. I can motivate you with financial rewards on one end or the threats and fear on the other side, right? Both sides motivate short term because when that stimuli is no longer there, the person's not going to do that thing. Right. So as a leader, rather than try to motivate you, it is incumbent upon me to try to inspire you. When you are inspired for the thing that we're talking about, you'll do it even if.
Welcome back to another installment of the Perspective Podcast. My name is Devin, and today on the show, we have Scott DeLong, who is a leadership coach, I guess we'll call you for now.
That's a good title to start.
Yeah, I know that you have a ton of experience in this world of kind of serving the entrepreneurial spirited people. So we're going to have a very in-depth conversation for anybody that is exploring the world of leadership or trying to take on a role of leadership in their life, business, relationships, that type of thing. I think that you offer a very unique perspective on this whole thing. You recently authored a book. Could you share the title with us?
Yeah, it's called I Thought I Was a Leader.
I Thought I Was a Leader. I love that as just as a metaphor to the whole idea of what leadership truly is, because we all I think intend to embark on that journey of leading people towards what we perceive to be success in different areas of our lives and things like that. But as we sometimes discover, what we think we know isn't always the truth for other people. And so I think that would be a really great place for us to springboard our conversation off of.
Sure.
What was your catalyst moment when you realized that maybe you weren't the leader you thought you were?
Wow. It was a recognition, I think, of what's important in life, right? And it came to me in a unique way. I actually had a dream one night where I saw this vision of these people sitting around, and I couldn't tell who the people were, but everything else in the dream was really vivid, and it was an old man sitting on a porch in a rocking chair, and standing next to him in the rocking chair was this little girl holding his hand. She might have been 4 or 5 years old. And off to the side, there were three 35, 40-year-old men hanging out, talking with each other, just laughing and joking. And off to the other side, there was a group of 4 women sitting in around a table. And it was just an interesting vignette that I saw. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I didn't see what it was until a few weeks later when this image kept coming back up to me. But I did recognize one thing. The thing that I recognized is that the old man wasn't dishing out candy to the little girl, advice to the young men, or money or anything else to anybody around that group. They were there because they wanted to be there and how they felt in the presence of this old man. And that just struck me. Because it certainly wasn't my life. My life was, I had plenty of people around me, but it was because of the things I could do for them. Whether it was in the sports world, helping win games, or whether it was in the business world, driving business success and chasing these trophies, I had money and those sorts of things, and building up people's careers and things that I thought I was doing for other people. And it wasn't for a few weeks until I realized that old man was me, and it was sometime in the future. Because it was so far from who I was at the time, but it just looked like it was my ideal. It was a vision of some place in the future that I wanted to get to. So I started 3 different things all about the same time. I went to an Entrepreneur Organization group, EO. I went back to school, got my doctorate in leadership studies. And I also had, and unfortunately, my wife and I had to get involved in Al-Anon and Al-Anon meetings because we had some, addiction issues in our family. And the thing that these 3 organizations all had in common was their style of communication. Small groups, people opening up and sharing their experiences, listening to each other, providing support for each other. And feeling in those rooms, whether it was the educational room or the EO room or the Al-Anon, Nar-Anon rooms, was a revelation. And I came up with these three principles, which we call principled leadership, but they're not the principles that you might have thought. But the three words that kept coming back into my mind were humility, empathy, and vulnerability. And I could dig into all those if you like, but that just kept circling. And that's what it brought to me. I mean, I grew up in an era of command and control leadership. I grew up where all my coaches, when I was playing ball, were tough men that would, make you do stuff and you'd have to do it their way. And there was one right way of doing things. Mm-hmm. When I entered the business world, my first bosses were exactly like that as well. Naturally, I became that kind of leader myself. The smartest guy in the room, just do it my way, it'll all work out, those kind of concepts. And the revelation between this vision of this place that I wanted to get to, who I was and how I did things, that gap was just huge. So I started working towards these things, and those principles kept coming back into my life. And I wish I could say I'd mastered them, but I'm not the old man on the porch yet. I'm not there yet. I'm working on it, right? It's my ideal. It's my vision. I'm so much closer than I ever was because of these principles and how I've embraced them. They're not tricks. They're principles.
Right. Core foundational elements of
absolutely
who you need to become as a leader. What's so interesting is something that I've noticed in my own experience, trying to be, or like making the attempt to be a leader in my own communities and things like that, is that idea that you can lead the people to the water, but you can't make them drink. And the actions that they take are indicative of the models that they had in their lives. And the more we start unpacking these models, the more we start to realize that ruling by fear, although effective, isn't the most effective way to achieve any form of leadership, for that, like, if we're pointing specifically at that. But on the other side of it, that idea of being in a constant state of practice, because just because you have heard of these terms, right? Your three pillars, the humility. Sorry, can you repeat them again one more time?
Humility, empathy, and vulnerability.
Humility, empathy, and vulnerability. They're all skills that we can learn, and they're all skills that we must practice in order to become good at them. And it's on an ongoing basis. I relate to this so much because in my own journey, when I am in a position to and I recognize it, to be a leader, right? Let's say, and I'm going to use a really simple one here. Hey, honey, what do you want for dinner? There is an opportunity for me to be the leader. I was asked specifically to be a leader. And in that moment, I met with a lot of things. I met with, first of all, my basic default response, which is whatever you want, dear. I'm too busy. I don't have the bandwidth to think of this thing. So I'm putting that on her, or putting that on whoever else. And so now it's their responsibility to come up with that. And now that makes them the person in the position of being in leadership. So I've relinquished my power, for example, in that situation, where I can actively catch myself in that moment and go, you know what, this is a moment where she's asking for me to lead because it's clear that she doesn't have the bandwidth to figure it out. And I know it's such a simple task. These are very, very simple tasks that we all encounter in our regular everyday lives. But it's in those moments that we get to practice that. Do you find that to be your experience in
Well, I think so, but slightly different as well, okay. Right? So I think there's an opportunity for leadership to part of my job of being a leader is to help the people that are with me learn and grow as well, okay. Or give them the opportunity, provide them the tools to do that. So in your scenario, hey, honey, what do you want for dinner? Rather than her relinquishing her power and giving you, I would prefer to co-create and equalize things and say, interesting, I've got an idea. And then I would turn it back and say something like, I'd love Chinese tonight. What do you think? And then invite them back into the conversation instead of just making the decisions. In my old world, I would have made the decision. I would have said, we're going to Chinese tonight. or whatever the decision was going to be. But what I found was if I really want to bring people with me, to invite them into the conversation, Chinese sounds good. What do you think? And leave the question coming back. Now, if she wants to defer and say Chinese sounds great, fine. Or we can get into a discussion and conversation but I'm inviting her into the conversation in that scenario. And I found that that's worked really well when you get into more complex situations. Give you an example. Employee comes into my office and they say, "Hey, Scott, we've got a problem. What should we do?" I used to give them the answer. Here's what we should do. What I've come to find out now is that teaching the man to fish instead of giving him the fish, right? Going back to the old Proverbs.
Yeah.
It is to say, my first question is, what do you think we ought to do? Now, that's engaging their mind in the conversation. It does more than that, though. So that's helping them learn how to formulate their ideas, but it's also lowering my status a little bit and letting them into the conversation. What do you think? I value your opinion too. That doesn't mean we have to go with what you've said, but I want to get into the conversation. So I will almost never anymore answer people's questions like that. I will answer with another question. And here's the answer they give me is, I don't know what to do. That's why I came and saw you. Right? That happens too.
Yeah.
And I still push back on that and say, okay, great. When you come up with a couple ideas, why don't you come on back in and we'll talk about them. And we'll talk to it. I push back because I want them to grow. I need to find a way to replace me in this world, in this business, wherever I am. And if I continually make decisions for people, I'm not helping them grow those muscles.
Okay, so let's dig into that, Scott. I wrote down role with a question mark. When you're in those moments, or when you're in that position, when somebody comes to you, I get there's a collaborative frame that you've taken whenever you're in those conversations, which is a difficult thing to do because it is our instinct to just problem solve.
Just solve it. Yep, that's an instinct.
So how do you make the distinction then between that in your role in leadership and do it so actively?
Well, I got to put a caveat on there. There is still a place in the world for command and control leadership, and that is when time is of the essence or we're in an emergency situation.
Okay.
If the building is burning down, I'm not going to call a meeting.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment.
We're going to make decisions, and we're going to say, you call 911, you get the fire extinguisher, you get these people out the door, right? We'll do that command and control in an emergency situation. Or if time is of the essence, like we need to make a decision in 2 minutes because the client's ready to walk. What should we do? Boom, I'll jump in and I'll give my best thought on that as well. But in most cases, they're not emergencies and we have time. So the first thing I do is evaluate, is this an emergency? Is it time critical? If not, my role is to teach rather than determine.
Oh, okay.
And I want to be a part of the conversation. I really do, because I've got a lot of experience. I've been running this business for a while, all those kind of things. So I don't necessarily just want people to be out on their own and throw them to the wolves and have them make decisions and fail fast and all those kind of things that people talk about. I want to be a part of the conversation, but I want to help guide that conversation to a place that's going to be a better decision for us. Now, I will have something that I want to do, but I know this to be true. Even if I think I'm the smartest guy in the room, we are smarter than me. Meaning, get your input is only going to enhance my thought process. It might confirm what I'm thinking. It might improve what I'm thinking. It might change what I'm thinking. And if we only go with what I think, we're only going to be as good as I can be, not as we can be.
Okay, there's a subtlety there that I just want to dig a little bit more into. Let's unpack that. The idea that, yes, you as the person is in the position of leadership have been placed in that position because of experience or knowledge or a combination of both of those elements. So you do, from a bird's eye view, 30,000 feet up, you have a good idea where everything is. And so now you have a skill to flex, which is asking the right questions to lead people to the answer that you know to be true.
Or a better answer than the one I know to be true. It could be better than mine.
And that's the subtlety that I wanted to point at was, okay, sometimes we might think that we have the right answer, and we might be really skilled at leading people to the right answer by asking the right questions and making it their idea. And I love the subtlety to that, but it's also in pursuit of finding right, not being right. And I think that one's really, really important for people to understand. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I used to believe that there was a right way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about this. I've made these. I've had the experience, and I've thought about it. And this is the right way. I don't know that that's true anymore. I don't know that there is a right way, and that right way belongs to Scott. Right? It is. Right. It is what is best for us in this moment. Is a better decision than the right way, the way that's always worked, the way that's always been right. I tell a story to people about. The world changes, right? I've been dealing with some technology things that are just way over my head these days because I didn't grow up with them. So show me the way. And if I was only going to go with my mindset, we would still have calculators and pencils and paper and because I'm an expert in those things. I know how to use them.
You probably still have the math times tables memorized.
Yeah. I remember doing those the contest, right? And I'd pound like this, and I'd give the right answer. And well, listen, the world does change, and I think it's great to be. I tell people all the time, always hang out with someone with a little more gray hair than you. That means they've done things, right? They've been places and they've done things, but that doesn't mean they know everything. It certainly doesn't mean I know everything. When you're talking about, in particular, technology, you don't want to lean on me for the answer for that. I want to bring some 20-year-olds into the conversation. I want to bring some people that are grown up using technology instead of being forced upon them. Or if you're building widgets, right? What's the widget that a 25-year-old wants? What do you think? A 63-year-old man's going to make the right decision on that without making decisions, without bringing people into the conversation? I know what the right widget is. I've had 63 years of experience, right? And we can sit there on this high horse and talk like that and miss the mark completely. I'm going back to we are smarter than me. Now, I certainly have something to add to the conversation. I don't think I don't, right? Whether it's the manufacturing process or the marketing process or the things that are within my wheelhouse, but I want to bring the experts into the room. And when I talk about experts, I'm talking about people with ideas. That's all. And it could be an unformed idea, and I can help form that. That would be one of the values that I would bring to the table is if you come up with a loose, raw idea, by working with me, I can help bring that out, right? Because I ask the right questions rather than make the right decisions.
Right. Which is a very, very key distinction to make between the two things. Something else that you uncovered in all of that is the role that your ego plays in all of this. How you at some point alluded to, in the conversation, I might think that I got the right answer, but my choice is to be in pursuit of finding the right answer. So even though my identity, my sense of confidence and job security and all those other key elements are resting on me being right, or at least that's my perception, right? And then when I'm not, a lot of people get caught in the trap of trying to defend just because of the sake of their identity. I have a lot of people in my network, very successful people, that are constantly at odds with the people around them because of that very nature. They know they're wrong. They have come to me in confidence behind closed doors and admitted to knowing that they're wrong, but now they have to go down with the ship. Do you have any advice for somebody that's still dealing with that?
That is the principle of humility, right? And talking about humility, empathy, vulnerability, that you described two of those. You described humility in there,
okay,
as a necessity for leadership today. It wasn't 50 years ago. It was not. It was, we need the great man making the decisions and following the leader and all of that. And that's just because that's what we grew up with, and that's how it was. But what you're talking about is humility as opposed to ego. Now, humility does not mean to me at least, it does not mean thinking less of myself and or that false humility. Oh, please don't give me praise. I'm not talking about that type of humility. The humility I'm talking about is recognizing that others in the room have value too. Every human being has value. I believe that. My experience with my son and the addiction issues, right? You can see a kid on the streets and they say, "Oh, what a waste of life!" And there's value in that life. So from the lowest depths, every human being has value. That's what I'm talking about, humility. That I'm just a human being just like them. Different experiences, I have different strengths and weaknesses, but they have strengths that I don't have. And being humble enough to elicit their support versus telling people what to do.
Right. A lot of people that are in that predicament, and I don't want to go too far off the rails on the addiction thing. I know that that's not exactly what the conversation is, but a lot of people that find themselves in that position find themselves there because of a lack of human connection.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really incredible science coming out now around how important it is for a person to feel loved, genuinely feel loved or feel heard or feel connected to other human beings. And with a lack of that connection or a lack of and again, it's skills that a person can build if they are offered those skills. In most cases, they don't get those from the models that they have. The models that they have lack those skills. And so that's why that behavior perpetuates, right? And it will continue to do so until we all do something about it. And this is kind of the punchline here, is that all great things that have ever happened in the timeline or trajectory of humanity have happened through collaboration.
Absolutely.
Now, there may be an individual that we can attribute a discovery or an epiphany to, but those discoveries and epiphanies still happened as a direct result of the collaborations that those people had with them. The great philosophers, they all had each other to have these deep conversations with. You know what I'm saying? The mathematicians.
We were not built to be alone, right?
Right. That just that much, man.
And that's where, going back to the image in my dream, right? This old man sitting on a porch, he wasn't sitting there by himself. He had community around him. It looked like a family to me, right? It was a little girl and maybe his sons, maybe his daughters and wives and whoever it was, but it was community. And the same kind of community, I believe, can happen in business and probably should happen in business too. It's not just family. I talk to people all the time. My clients say, "Well, I act like this at work, but my real personality is this at home." And I said, "Well, which of those two people do you like better?" "Oh, I like this one better." "Well, do that one, right? It'll work." "And why will it work?" "Well, it won't work in business." "Sure it will, because guess what? The common denominator of dealing with people at home and people in the workplace is they're all just people. They're all just people. And they all have wants and desires and needs, and human connection is one of those needs. It's absolutely one of those needs. Probably at the top of the list. Well, you got air, water, food, and then connection, whether it's love or just community or whatever it's going to be, right? And the approach that I talk about in leadership, this principled leadership, creates those connections. Creates them by being humble, by recognizing that you have value, by showing empathy, by listening to your story, by hearing you from your point of view, not my interpretation of what your point of view is, but digging down deep enough to find out what you really are feeling, or as close as I can. I never will fully understand because I don't have your background, your experience. I don't have your consequences. I don't have all that, but I can be empathetic. Then try to understand, not sympathetic and not feeling sorry for you, but really trying to understand. And then this vulnerability piece, which is probably the most controversial, when you're talking about a leader being vulnerable, there has to be limits on things, certainly. But here's the thing about vulnerability. I have found that being vulnerable is the most attractive quality I can possess. When I say to somebody, "I'm really struggling today. I've had this problem." You know what they do? They lean in. They come towards me. Unless they have antisocial personality disorder, right? With narcissists, sociopath, psychopath. Those folks don't care. And that's only 5% of the world. 4 to 5% of the world has that disorder. Great. The rest of us, 95%, if I'm going to be vulnerable with you, you're going to lean in. It attracts more people to me. And being vulnerable just says I'm human too. That's really what we're talking about. I've got things too.
There's
I'm not going to dump all my burdens on you.
Right.
But what I'm going to expose you to is my humanity.
And I was just going to point at that. The subtlety in this is not being vulnerable in that you're coming from the frame of being a helpless victim.
Right.
Rather, you are facing a difficult challenge and will do so of your own accord and of your own strength, but you're open to the idea of taking suggestions in an appropriate course of action.
Yeah.
And that's much different. It's so crazy you talked about or mentioned that, this isn't going to work in this because it's business and that's this. And there's all this separation between the whole thing. I'll tell you this, and this might be opening up a Pandora's box a little bit here, but quick little story. Fresh out of high school, I had my high school sweetheart. We broke up. I fell in love with this new girl, and it was like a hot and heavy relationship. We were married within a year, had our kids, and after that, it was nothing but turmoil. And when it finally came to a close, I was faced with something that I didn't really know if I would have the strength myself to deal with, which is having an entire imagined reality, a life that was ahead of me just collapsing in on itself. And so that's a very crushing moment. Now, going through all of that, being resilient and resourceful as I am, I decided, you know what, after about 2 months of me kind of really coming to terms with it, this was over, I have to move on. I started looking to enter the dating pool again. The problem is that I only had 2 serious relationships from high school to being married, now being out on my own with a kid. There's a lot of perception, self-image that I had to overcome while going through all of that stuff. And I ended up finding myself in the shadowy realm on YouTube of this world called pickup artists. I don't know if you know anything about this world, but essentially it has been dubbed this manipulative, conniving sect of men who are slimy and hurtful and all these bad things. And the reality of it all was I'm one of those guys. And I don't see myself as hurtful or manipulative or narcissistic or all these other things. What I see myself as is a guy who has no idea how to communicate properly with women.
Yeah.
And so what I found myself learning along the way was a whole bunch of really, really deep principles on self-development and self-work and self-discovery, radical honesty and transparency with myself, to realize a lot of the problems that existed in the relationships that I had came as a result of me and my lack of skills. And in learning all of those new things, at the same time, I was facing a lot of difficulties and challenges in my business in that I was really bad at sales. I couldn't connect with people. I was always too pushy, and I was doing a bunch of things that just came off icky to whoever it was that I was talking to. And I had this epiphany in that transformation over the course of about a year, that everything that worked over here in the dating world also worked over here in the sales world. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's not sales, it's not pickup artistry, it's communication and being able to use a skill.
Yeah.
Is that common? Do you find that in your line of work?
It is the answer, but it's not common. It's the answer, right? So we learn the skills to be a salesperson, or we learn the skills to be a pickup artist, or we learn the skills to be a whatever. Why don't we learn the skills of connection? And connection is done through communication. And here's the concept about communication that's really important. Communication is less of what I say as it is of what you hear and interpret. Right? So I need to speak your language, whatever that's going to be. Like, in order, if I want my message to come across right. And here's what I found. I'm glad you used the dating thing, because I did this in a keynote one time. I said, so here I am, I'm an older guy, and I said, I could walk into any bar in the country and get a date if I wanted to.
Mhm.
And people look at me and say, yeah, right. What do? Put $100 bill on your forehead, or kind of stuff? What trick are you going to use? And so a few minutes later, I kind of gave a little demonstration, and there was a woman in the front row, and I started asking her questions about her. Asked 4 or 5 questions, and I don't remember what it was. I think about her last vacation, who she went with, where they went, those guys. Just kept going deeper and deeper into the questions. The first ones were easy questions to answer, and then I got a little bit deeper. And after about the 6th question, I said, "You want to go get coffee?" And she goes, "Yeah," like in front of the whole crowd. So it just gave an example. So be interested rather than interesting.
Which requires you to kind of flip the camera around a little bit, because so many people are focused on like, oh, I don't look good, my hair's not right, I don't know, I.
Yeah.
Right? And if you just turn it around and you look and you go, you, what's up with you? And you put the attention somewhere else, it's like this, it's like a magical superpower that not a lot of people have figured out exists.
Let's go back to the earlier conversation we talked about. Somebody comes to me with a problem, and they say, "What do you think we ought to do?" My answer is, "What do you think?" Turn it around to you. It's not about me. It's about us, right? And the way to get to us is for me to focus on you. That's how we're going to get to us. Personal relationships, business relationships, doesn't matter. It is this. Who was it? Was it Carnegie that said this? And might not have been, but people love hearing the sound of their own name. The sweetest sound that someone can hear is the sound of their own name. Well, darn, if that works, let's do that. And it can't be fake. It's got to be genuine interest, right? These can't be just tricks. But I need to show care and concern for you, another human being. And the more that I do that, the more you're going to want to hang out with me. It's just the way it works. If I start with me, look at my cool watch, look at my great ride out there, my big house over there, we can go on vacation to this place, all that. I don't want to hang out with those people. The people that I want to hang out with are showing care and concern for me. If I want people to hang out with me, I need to show care and concern about and for them.
That kind of points at the law of reciprocity.
Yeah, and that actually works. So it's not all about giving up all of my power and all of my influence and all of my, because the law of reciprocity will come into play here. When I start asking questions about you and really listening to those answers, you are going to return the favor and do the same for me. You are going to ask about me. You're going to say, "Well, that guy's really interested in me. I need to find out a little bit about him." Works in the business world just like it does in the personal world.
Well, and the proof is in the pudding too, right? If you, let's say we're on a sales call and I'm trying to close a $3,000 marketing deal, and I pull out all the tricks in the book and I really make it seem like I cared about that person, but it was inauthentic because I was using tricks, and I got the deal. I might have pressure closed and got the money.
Yep.
But that client is going to be a very difficult client to work with.
They're not going to feel good about it.
Yeah, they're going to have buyer's remorse nearly immediately. So, and then they're going to push back on all the things. Whereas if you were to ask all the right questions and genuinely take that into account and then provide suggestions for solutions that genuinely could help, that person feels heard and feels secure inside of this transaction, and they will last longer. They will have less doubt in the work that you do. They will trust the results more. And overall, that relationship is going to be much stronger as a result, just because of the authenticity of it.
And they will also have more tolerance for missteps in the process. Because the process is perfect, right?
Right.
But if we're this collaborative and we're working this thing together and we have a misstep, they're going to have more tolerance for that misstep. Right. So it works on the positive side and the negative side both, by forming these human connections.
Right.
And it really works. And it's thinking not about, even in the buying world, right? We talk about benefits and not features. So if I tell you all the features, I'm talking all about me. If I talk about benefits, I'm talking all about you. It's the same concept, even in the sales trickery world, is selling benefits instead of features. Same thing in human world. It works with people because you're showing genuine interest in what they have to say. So here's the problem with this concept, though, as opposed to my old school way of this command and control leadership style that I once employed. It takes longer. It takes longer to involve people. I can make a decision by myself really fast, and it'll be the right decision, at least what I thought was right. It may not be the best decision. So if by me asking you questions and getting in dialogue with you or with a team, whatever it's going to be, it's going to take longer than me just making a command and control decision. Absolutely will. So that's the only downside that I can say. And if you don't have time, you can't do it, right? If the building's burning down, you got to make snap decisions on what you think is best at the time. But if the building's not burning down, you want to develop relationships, you want to help elevate your people, get them thinking. And you get them thinking by asking them what they think as opposed to telling them what to do.
Okay, so as a leader, then I think part of the role that we've just kind of uncovered in this discussion is that it's maybe your job to sort some of these things into different boxes. Do you find that to be true?
Explain that a little bit more. Tell me.
So some things require more time to get to the outcome. And I would make the argument that it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think being more cautious or being more thorough is a bad thing. Most people would agree that that's a good thing. But like you said, if the building is burning and it's falling down, those are two key categories or boxes that we as leaders now can put problems in. So yes, sure. If somebody came to me with a problem that was like, hey, our P&Ls this quarter are a little bit off. We got to rework the numbers and do this kind of thing. And like, okay, I can ask some questions and kind of lead that conversation and we can get to something, right? And this doesn't need to be solved in this meeting. It'll be over a series of meetings, collaborative with a bunch of other departments, whatever else. And so we put that in one box. If somebody comes in and they go, oh, hey, the New York Times just wrote a piece about our CEO and he's having an affair with such and such, and now this whole thing is, so that's the building's on fire, the building's burning down. Those are two very extreme examples.
So the building on fire is an emergency. The New York Times story is time is of the essence. We don't have a lot of time for this.
Right.
And those are the two things where I still think command and control leadership, where the most qualified person should be making the decision, as opposed to gathering all the input from others.
And so time is the one thing that you would use as a metric to kind of make that determination.
Yeah. If time is of the essence and we just don't have the time, I'm going to tell people, let's go this way.
So you've had a lot of experience clearly in this world. You've come across all kinds of situations, both mundane and extreme. What are some of the common problems that you see popping up with the leadership or the people that you're working with?
Conflict is probably the thing that happens. I'll tell you a story of an organization I was working with. That was a merger of two companies. Okay. So you have duplicity in roles, right? There's a vice president in this department, in this company, and a vice president in this company, and they're trying to merge these. Well, you're twice as big now. Maybe you have room for all these people, but maybe you don't. We got to figure that out. But I had a situation where there was these two very qualified women with very different approaches who were both vice presidents of the same department, coming from two different companies. One had a lot more feminine characteristics, and one acted more like the old school masculine decision maker kind of place. You can envision who these ladies are. Well, they couldn't even stand to be on a Zoom call with each other, even as part of a large group. The conflict was so great that they just couldn't. So what's going to happen? You're both going to lose your job in that scenario. I'm not going to keep either one of you if you can't help us get to the right place. So that was a scenario with extreme conflict. And even in that scenario, we were able to solve for the problem. We took them through a series in individual coaching, one-on-one coaching for each of them, a series of 4 different times that we got with both of them. And then I brought them together. And I can tell you the process that we did, but it was a very specific process that we went through. And then I brought them both together with me as a facilitator, right? Moderator, if you will, but a facilitator. But I wasn't needed. By the time we got there, the 5th visit when they were together, they didn't need me. It was awesome. The first one, the one that acted with this tough approach, the masculine kind of approach, apologized up front, and she was actually crying. Like on this, we were on a Zoom call, just like this, and she was actually crying, and the other one couldn't help but as well. And they made a human connection because they saw each other as enemies. And what we did during this process is we got them to see the value that the other person brought to the table. So to tell you the quick process that we went through, the first meeting that I had with each of them individually is that I said, I want you to write a list of everything that you don't like about this woman. And then you're going to tell me about it.
Right.
And then I'm never going to hear about that again. I'm going to allow you to vent. I'm going to allow you to get it off your chest.
Right.
The next step was, I want you to write a list of everything positive that you can see about this woman. Even if it's as little as, I like the color of her hair, or she wears nice shoes, or she's really smart at work, or people seem to like, whatever. I want you to give me a list. And I said, and I want this to be a serious list. I know that woman over there. I could think of a whole bunch of things. I want you to think of a whole bunch of things, right? And then they had to go through that process of talking about the value that other person brings to the world, not just to the company, but to the world. Right. And we did that for a few weeks. And then I told them what was going to happen when we brought them together. And honestly, and I said, I'm going to be there. It's going to be safe. Don't worry, right? They didn't need me at all. Like they were able to, they saw each other as human beings. So I tell people all the time that conflict, people have 2 ways of going through it. Typically, they fight or they flight, right? It's fight or flight. Because conflict, I'm either going to battle through it or I'm going to stay away from it completely. And I think there's a better way and there's another way. And I think it's a collaborative approach that we can actually get benefit out of conflict.
Right.
And we start with this simple concept that conflict is just a difference of opinion. If you can break it down to that, even thinking about wars, it starts with just a difference of opinion. And then we build it up to make this big, gigantic thing that ends up shooting people. It's to me, it's ridiculous. Conflict is a difference of opinion. Right. I use my earlier approach to say, find out what you think, right? The best way for me to work through this conflict is for me, even though I'm on the other side, I'm trying to fight for what I want is right as well, right? For me to disable myself and become humble enough to find out what the issues are for you. And I'll go first. I'll ask you about you. I'm not going to just try to make my points. I'm going to find out about you. Find out why is this important? How does that work? Tell me more about that. Really get into that. What ends up happening when I see people in conflict like this, and then they disarm the other person by asking about what's important to them. The first thing that I see happening, their shoulders drop. It's like, it's no longer this. There's no longer leaning in and like pointing their finger and doing all that angry stuff. When I show care and concern for what you're thinking, even if I don't agree with what you're saying, right? Shows care and concern for your thing, your shoulders are going to drop and you're going to loosen up and we're going to have a better conversation. And then that theory of reciprocity comes back in and you're going to ask me about my stuff. And guess what we find out? With the 2 differences of opinion, I doubt either of them are completely right. There's some truth to both. And what can we co-create together to get what's better for us out of that conflict? And we can't do it if we just sit there and fight for our positions or run away from them. But to communicate through the things that are important, what's important to you, what's important to me, what else could we make from this? And then we almost always get a better solution than either of us could have come up with on our own.
Wow. The definition of being humble, I think executed to the letter in terms of what it actually means. I really wanted to dig into this one when you first mentioned it, because I think that there's a lot of value to be had here. I encounter on such a regular basis false humble people.
Yeah.
What I mean by false humble people is one of two things. It's somebody who doesn't know how to take a compliment and so pretends that, oh, don't give me that, but like secretly their ego is growing. Okay, so there's that category of people who are almost ignorantly confident, right? I think of the Donald Trumps of the world. Like there's not a thought that has crossed that man's mind that he could possibly be stupid. Like I don't even know the word to use. Like he could not be wrong because in his mind he's so delusionally correct.
He could not defer to someone else at all.
Right. Okay. So there's that group of people. There's another group of people that I encounter quite frequently, and I think that this is more the majority. And these are the people who actually feel a social pressure not to stand out in any way. And so when they receive a compliment, their natural reaction is to, no, please don't put the spotlight on me. I don't want to stand out because when I stand out, I get attacked. And so they do this reverse humble thing where it's like, the way that I said it was, humble isn't shitting on yourself when somebody says something nice about you. It's not shitting on other people when they have something to say. So forgive the French, but the point is that it's not about taking yourself down a notch. It's about bringing the other person up to your level so that you're on the same playing field. Do you concur with that?
Absolutely. I think the way, if I am the CEO, right, the leader of the organization or the boss of the organization, I'll be a leader when I bring other people into the conversation, when I bring them with me. They will be following because they want to, not because they have to. If I engage in this in the manner that you're talking about, right, it is to say we're going to level the playing field. And yes, I might ultimately have to make the final decision because it is my job. But if I just make that without your input, I might be able to get you to do the thing. Right. I can get compliance. If I engage you in the conversation and we co-create and then I have to make a decision that we've all came up with, I get your commitment. I'd much rather have commitment from my people than cooperation.
Getting people to buy in.
Yeah. And you get them to buy in by treating them as if, not treating them as if, it's not a game, ensuring that they recognize that you see value in what they have to say.
Or
even if we can't use your idea this time, even if we can't, but I took the time to think about it, consider it, discuss it, do all that. That's where the impact is made.
You got to allow people to invest in you. I think that that's a part of it. If you're going to be the leader or the one that makes the decisions, people have to like you. They have to trust you. They have to have some kind of track record. And if you want them to feel like they're a part of your team, then you have to give them space to allow them to be able to invest in you. And I think about this a lot, man, in terms of personal relationships. Right? The reason why my relationship with my father is as good as it is because I allow room for him to provide advice for me or guidance or counseling or coaching or whatever it is. On the flip side of that, my dad lets me know that I'm valuable by allowing me to, if I went out into the world and I figured something out, he lets me bring it back to him and be like, hey, Dad, look. And he'll look at it, even if it's something he already knows, he gives me the space to be able to invest in him. Yeah. And that makes that relationship so much more valuable. Yeah. And I'm moved by that. The same thing happens in my romantic relationships with my siblings, and more importantly, in relationships with my friends and colleagues and peers, the people that I'm actually trying to lead, and giving them that space now to be like, no, what you have to say is important. And I want you to know how important it is. And once it's out now and we have all of the things on the table, metaphorically speaking, we can look at it together. And if we didn't put it there, then we couldn't. And so now we can't trust each other. Do you see what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. In fact, I think that's exactly right. What that will create is, even if you do not have positional power, a title, people will still follow that approach. They will follow you for that. for the grace that you're providing for them, for the inclusiveness, for all those things. You are going to have your people. They're going to be there. And that's the definition of a leader. A leader is nothing if they don't have people that are willing to follow. Right? I can get you to, as the boss, I can get you to do things. I can motivate you, right? I can motivate you with financial rewards on one end, or the threats and fear on the other side, right? Both sides motivate short term. Because when that stimuli is no longer there, the person's not going to do that thing. Right. So as a leader, rather than try to motivate you, it is incumbent upon me to try to inspire you as opposed to motivate you. When you are inspired for the thing that we're talking about, you'll do it even if that stimulus isn't sitting there. It's inspirational. It makes me feel good to be able to do this thing as opposed to he's paying me or he's not going to fire me, right? Which is motivation. So I work on motivation instead of inspiration instead of motivation.
That's a clever twist to the whole thing. That points at there's this common thing that I keep seeing in a lot of the gurus that are out there talking about leadership and management. One of them, Gary Vaynerchuk, and I think Simon Sinek and a couple others mention this idea of you as the boss or the leader of the company. Yeah, sure, these people work for you, but they're there to pursue a collective goal of whatever that company's job is to do, and therefore you are in service of them. And that's a flip on the whole script. What's your take on that? Are you familiar with that? First of all,
I studied that. Getting a doctorate in this concept of leadership, right? Yeah. And when you talk about the servant leader, there are transformational leadership. There is authentic leadership, which people put in this pile of progressive leadership styles, right?
Right.
Do you know that those theories are 50 years old, and we're just now starting to get to it? Command and control has been the way to do it. The way that leadership has always been
for millennia.
Theories have 50 years old.
They're just babies,
and they're powerful, and especially when we're dealing with millennials and Gen Zs and all that. Those young people aren't going to put up with that old style. They're just not. We the baby boomers taught them not to.
Right.
Grow up and be your person. And now we're complaining. We're as leaders of them, right? We complain about them. Oh, they're say all these bad things about the younger generations. I guess This is what everybody does. But I'm telling you, those young people are not going to put up with that old style. And we have to get to one of these progressive leadership styles or a mix of those kind of things. And I'm, I added my contribution to the leadership world was doing what's called principled leadership and adding 3 qualities that you don't normally think of: humility, empathy, and vulnerability into all the rest of them, right? If I lead with that, if I'm truly that, not just pretending to be, if I'm truly humble, if I'm truly empathetic, if I'm truly vulnerable, people will want to be around me in business and in life, both.
That's an incredible way of looking at it. I'm reminded of how quickly tyrannical leadership or dictatorship is overturned by a simple television show. It has been on air for 44 years, or 44 seasons, 22 years. I'm pointing at Survivor. Would you watch Survivor?
No, but I get the premise.
Me and my family studied it religiously, and when I say studied it, we have a running pot that we've all made bets on 4 or 5 seasons ago of who we thought was going to be the one that makes it out. And there are certain criteria that we use to choose the people that we want, and then we watch how it unfolds and the interactions, the social interactions of these groups of people being put into this challenging environment, and you do see a natural hierarchy form, but you see some leadership styles that are outdated or don't work anymore become obvious. And this is the curious part about it is you'll have a guy that shows up and he's the dictator's type leader where he's like, okay, you guys go do this and you do this and you do this. And then he talks about how he doesn't want to be the leader, but he goes and does all of these things. And then how people respond to that so negatively, putting a target on that person's back and getting them voted off the island. And that's just how it works. And it doesn't maybe necessarily happen that way, because in Survivor, you can kick somebody off the island. The thing is in corporate or in the world of business or commerce, it's basically the opposite, where if I have a dictatorial leader in my organization, I'm going to leave. And that's going to attribute to high levels of turnover in these companies. And then that's a wasted money and a whole bunch of other things, lost profits and everything else. And so there really is not just a need for the fabric of society for better leadership to happen, but also for the fundamental system that we have operating that is capitalism. We're all supposed to be in this thing together to make something work and for the pursuit of the betterment of all of our lives. The quality of life is significantly improved over the last century, but at the end of the day, it's the leadership style and how it's transforming has seeped into all of these other areas of our lives that we didn't really see coming.
Yeah. Listen, people do that dictator style, the command and control, as I call it, because it works.
Right.
But it works short term. It's a short-term solution. It's very efficient. It takes less time for me to tell you what to do than to sit and have a discussion about it, right? So it's very efficient. It's not really effective though, because and you've seen in the pandemic really where you started noticing these things happening, the transitions happening, is the high turnover rates.
Right.
Nobody's these young people aren't going to put up with it. They're just not. They can find a place that's going to suit their needs better. Now, and this is what I tell my clients: why work on these soft skills? And they are skills, right? There are things that you can learn. Why work on these soft skills? And they say, well, what are the metrics? What are you gonna? And I can't tell you you're going to double or triple your sales. I can't do that. You're probably going to do much better, but what I can tell you is that you're going to lower your turnover rate. Because here's the thing about people. If they're happy, they're content, they feel heard, they feel valued, studies show it takes an increase of 35% in dollars to get them to consider leaving the job. Not a 10% increase, 35%. Wow. You'd have to pay me an extra $35,000 to get me to leave a place where I'm feeling this value from folks. And as opposed to what we saw during the pandemic, is that people were leaving for 2%, for 5%, right? They're getting bumps, and then they got up to 10, then they got to 20 and all that. But they had no loyalty at all because the loyalty wasn't earned from the company. And it's earned by treating them with respect.
Yeah.
Dignity.
If you want respect, you have to give respect. And I don't like that idea of the reverse of it where, oh no, you have to earn my respect. So I'll use this as an example, and I think this will be a really great way to close this off. When I was, it was 2 Christmases ago, my current girlfriend was working at Salvation Army. And the guys that stand with the kettle and they ring the bells and then they take donations. Usually it's just somebody standing there doing nothing and they don't really collect a whole lot. The numbers on the other side are embarrassing in most cases. We ended up doing a hockey game together as just a date night thing. We volunteered and went and did it. And what they do is they set you up. Here's your location. They give you a box of candy canes and they say anytime somebody gives you a donation, you give them a candy cane. Now I know you probably see where this is going. At first, I played by the rules, but I am not a rule-following guy if it is not serving the higher purpose of all of this. I am not just going to blindly avoid the latter. What ended up happening was about 10 minutes into this whole thing, I'm like, everybody is clearly trying to avoid us. We got to do something different. And we're already dressed up. I had a Christmas, a suit that was made out of Christmas print material. My girlfriend had the elf suit on. We really went all out on this thing. We were trying to enjoy it as much as we could. So what I did was I went into the bucket of candy canes, I grabbed a handful of them, and I just started handing them out.
Yep.
And no word of lie, Scott, for almost 95% of the people that I handed a candy cane to, it was no more than 8 steps they would get away from that kettle, and they'd be digging in their pockets and looking for whatever they had.
Yep.
Even if it was just a few pennies, a dime, a quarter, or whatever. And so by the end of the hockey game that night, our kettle thing was full. We couldn't have any more change donated, and there was 4 other locations around the stadium, and they didn't even reach a quarter capacity of their kettles, and just on that principle alone.
So give to get instead of if you give me this, I'll give you that thing. Right? And that's really what you experienced was the law of reciprocity.
Right.
The Hare Krishners did this. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Hare Krishners in the airports. They would hand out these people dressed in their robes and whatever. They hand out a flower to people, just to hand them a flower. They would always get $1 in return.
Yeah,
always get $1 in return because of the law of reciprocity.
It's very, very powerful.
It's true. It's true. And so the Hare Krishners ended up getting banned from airports because people don't like giving up their dollars to these people in robes. But your candy cane story reminded me of the Hare Krishner experience is that, no, like, I'm not going to buy a candy cane for $1, right? But if you gave me a candy cane, I'm going to reach in my pocket to see what I can give to you. Your little candy cane wasn't worth $1 or $2 or $5 or whatever, right?
Yeah, barely worth a nickel.
You were selling them. In the first scenario, you were selling them. No. Give to get.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, great story.
You've been incredibly generous with your time today, Scott. I can't tell you how much value you have shared with the audience. I am very grateful, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody listening and watching. If somebody wanted to, get in touch with you and learn more about you and maybe get a copy of the book and all that kind of stuff, where would we go to do that?
So the easiest way to get a hold of me, you go on our website. The company's called Lead to Goals, LEAD, the number 2, goals, GOALS.com. All kinds of information there. But if you just want to send me an email directly, it's scott@leadtogoals.com, and I will reply. If somebody wants to talk to me, I want to talk to them, right? So I'm going to reply there. The book's on Amazon. The title again is I Thought I Was a Leader, and it's in audio version, not audio version yet, but it's in the Kindle version and then a hardcover and softcover. You find to get that, but just reach out and send me an email, and we'll get on the phone and we can chat.
Beautiful. Make sure to link all of that stuff in the show notes for anybody that's listening or watching. And some parting words, Scott, if there was one thing that you could tell a listening leader right now that would help them have the breakthrough that they need to move into more of a reciprocating style of management, what would that be?
Well, you said it, a listening listener, right? Listen to your people, right? We are smarter than me. Just come back to that, right? I can't do this by myself. I mean, I can, but I'm going to be limited to what I can do. But with the collective, with all these people that are sitting here trying to help and bring in their ideas, we're going to get better. And it's going to make our relationships better, and they're not going to leave when they feel part of it, right? Just go with that. We are smarter than me.
Listening is a skill that you can practice. It starts today. Love that, Scott. Thank you so much for being on the show. That's it for this episode, and we will see you in the next one.